Hi friends, welcome to McBean Immigration Law TV. It's been a while, I know. It's been a while since I did my last video on the unlawful presence waiver, but I've got a really good reason, friends. I've been busy, I've moved. We're in Long Island now, in Elmont, Long Island, if you haven't yet seen the announcements that we put out. And so that has kept me busy, but I'm back. I'm super excited to be back in front of you with another video. In this one, I'm going to address the question of what evidence should you submit with your I-601A unlawful presence waiver. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one. Friends, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being patient with me as we've been going through transitions here on my end with my office. We're settled in. We're really nice and comfortable now. If you haven't met with me in person yet, now is a good time to come out. Come out to Elmont and have your consultation with me here in person. I'd be glad to meet with you and to talk about your immigration problem. But let's just dive right in. So I've done 3 videos on the unlawful presence waiver. I'm going to put a link to those videos right above here so that you can go back and review and learn a little bit more about the unlawful presence waiver, the I-601A unlawful presence waiver. I talked about who is eligible. A lot of people think they're eligible for this, but they're not. I talked about who your qualifying relatives are and a number of other topics. So please stop this video now, go check out the other 3 videos, and then come right back to this one. So when you think about evidence to submit to the government, you have to ask yourself the question of what is the hardship, first of all? What is that extreme hardship that my U.S. citizen parent or spouse will suffer if I have to move back to the country that I'm from, if I have to go back, right? That's your starting point. So if the person will suffer hardship because of health or medical issues or conditions that he or she is suffering from, then that is something you really need to hone in on as it relates to the evidence that you assemble. So for example, you would need to assemble medical records, doctor's letters, anything of that nature, prescription medication lists. You've got to really well document the medical condition or conditions that your qualifying relative is currently suffering from. And then certainly you have to connect how you fit into all of this, right? Are you a caregiver? Are you the person driving your spouse to the doctor? Is your spouse or your parent going through chemotherapy or dialysis or any ongoing chronic illness? You want to talk about what that illness is and how you help your relative to get through the day-to-day. So that's one set of evidence you need to think about assembling medical records. Secondly, you'll need to craft a really nice declaration. A declaration is a story that tells the government what's going on, basically, right? It introduces the government to your qualifying relative, what his or her life story is like as it relates to this condition or conditions that he or she is suffering from. It tells the story of why they need you and how critical you are to their life. So a declaration from the qualifying relative is very critical. Very critical to your unlawful presence waiver, and certainly a declaration from you, right? You of yourself need to tell the story of what's going on with your relative and how you fit into it all and how you're helping that relative and why that relative needs you here in the United States with him or her. So a declaration from, I would say, both of you would be absolutely essential to any unlawful presence waiver packet. Thirdly, if there are financial concerns that your qualifying relative has, for example, if he or she depends on you for support, right? Maybe because that person is disabled or can no longer work, whatever the situation may be, you've got to provide the evidence of the fact that They are dependent on you for financial support. So you want to submit items like bank statements, receipts, grocery receipts, those kinds of things. Just so you know, the government really doesn't care that much about the financial situation that you or your qualifying relative is suffering from, really. That's not the big selling point here for this kind of waiver. That's not very convincing, I should say, to a waiver packet. But nonetheless, if you can couple that with a medical condition that your qualifying relative suffers from, whether it's diabetes or cancer or kidney failure or anything like that, heart failure, that you're helping that relative to manage, right? That is more convincing than the financial standpoint of things. Now, if children are involved and you are the caretaker of, you're the guardian, I should say, or parent of the child, and that child is somehow, his or her life is intertwined with the qualifying relative's life, you want to talk a little bit about how the children would be impacted too if you had to depart and go back to your country permanently, right? Why these children need you. But be careful with the children, because some people think that just because they have a U.S. citizen child, it makes them eligible for the unlawful presence waiver. And in fact, it does not. As I've talked about in previous videos, the only qualifying relatives for this waiver, I should say, is a U.S. citizen or a green card holder parent, or a U.S. citizen or green card holder spouse. So those are the only two. But children can play a role, certainly, particularly if he or she is connected to that qualifying relative. So you want to submit school records and such proof of how, you're caring for the child and how the child is connected to the qualifying relative and so on and so forth. But let me back up also with respect to the financial hardship. The other evidence that you'll need to provide are your pay stubs, right? You need to provide pay stub, utility bills, if you purchase furniture, you need to, any major purchases for the home, you're going to want to submit receipts and proof that you've made those purchases. Insurances, any insurances that you're paying for, car insurance, health insurance, life insurance, or anything like that, submit those types of documents as well. You also want to submit letters of support from friends and family who are familiar with the situation that your qualifying relative is facing. These are people who can talk in detail about the condition, the medical condition, the financial hardship, how the children come into play into everything. You need people who are familiar with the situation that you and your family are facing. So you need some notarized letters of support or affidavits from these individuals. I would say maybe 4 or 5. It depends on the case, right? Every case is different, but at least 4 or 5 letters is a nice number for your unlawful presence waiver. Those are just some basic evidence that you need to think about pulling together for this waiver. But friends, I must tell you that this waiver is not an easy one to obtain. You want to make sure you get this done right. Work with a lawyer, work with someone who has experience in this area, and make sure you get it done correctly. Friends, thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for my next video. Bye-bye.